Group, Nigel Farage has the floor.
Mr Van Rompuy, I hope you'll resist the calls for military action this afternoon. Indeed, the Liberal leader, Mr Verhofstadt, made a very pro-war speech. I hope you will resist that on the grounds that there is no legitimacy or consent for the European Union to take military action, and that experience shows that if you go into military action, that may be easy, but getting out of it could be rather more difficult, and getting involved in Libya could indeed be a Vietnam-type experience. So please resist it. But on Colonel Gaddafi himself, I mean, you were quite right to say that what's happening in Libya is really very wrong indeed. But of course we knew that even before the uprising. Just last year he declared a holy war, a jihad, against the Swiss. He tried to blackmail the European Union. Do you remember? He said, give us 5 billion euros or we'll flood you with migrants. And of course he's the man who was happy to embrace al-Megrahi, the man who committed the biggest ever mass murder in British history. But what you didn't tell us in your speech was about the fact that you actually know Mr Gaddafi. Indeed, you went to meet him in December, didn't you? Do you remember? In fact, there was a jolly nice photograph of you and Mr Gaddafi holding hands. In fact, I have to say, I've never seen you smiling more or looking happier. I mean, perhaps he's an old drinking mate, I don't know. But I wonder why? Why would you want to be photographed with Mr Gaddafi? And I put it to you that it could well be that since you were appointed as President of Europe and your sidekick, the noble Baroness Ashton, became the High Representative for Foreign Affairs, that you know that you've been seen on the global stage like a couple of political pygmies. As WikiLeaks showed, you were very unhappy that you weren't being recognised, unhappy that you were snubbed by Obama, and here was the chance to go along and be accepted by a head of state. I don't think that you there, parading with dictators, was a very good or a sensible thing to do. Indeed, not just you, the British Labour government made similar mistakes. But I do ask you, at this juncture, and with the horrendous things that are going on in Libya, I do ask you, do you accept that it was an error to be photographed as recently as December with Colonel Gaddafi, and will you please if you do, apologise for it? Thank you.
Dziękuję. Thank you very much. The next speaker.
Well, Mr Barroso, not just you, but the entire unelected government of Europe had a chance perhaps for our citizens to reflect on where the real power lies in this union. I've listened to you for nearly 10 years. Full marks for consistency. You know, you're a man that likes fixed ideology. You probably picked it up when you were a communist or Maoist or whatever you were. And for the last 10 years, you've pursued Euro-federalism combined with an increasing green obsession. And yeah, it's been good. For bureaucrats, for big businessmen, for landowners, it's not been a bad decade. But it's been a disaster for poor people, unemployed people, and those on low wages. The euro, which you believed would give us monetary stability, has done the very opposite. It was a misconstruction from the start, and it's pretty clear that youth unemployment at nearly 50% across the Mediterranean is probably nearly double what it would have been as a direct result of the misconstruction that is the euro. They're in the wrong currency, but I know that you'll never ever admit to that, and the euro, I think, will die a very slow and painful death. But you're all in denial about that. But that I find really more interesting. You keep telling us that climate change is an absolute top priority, and you've been greeted with almost hysteria in this place over the last 10 years. Well, those of us that have been sceptical about this have been mocked, derided, called deniers. We've argued from the start that the science wasn't settled, and we've argued very strongly that the measures we're taking to combat what may or may not be a problem are damaging our citizens, and we've been proved to be right. Tens of millions forced into fuel poverty, manufacturing industry being driven away because, of course, our competitors in China and in America are going for cheap fossil alternatives, and, of course, wind turbines blighting the landscapes and seascapes of Europe. And still today, you go on about green growth. Well, the consensus is breaking behind you. You know, Commissioner Tajani the other day said that actually we face a systematic industrial massacre. It is time to stop this stupidity and to help you. There's the NASA photograph last August of the ice cap, the northern ice caps. And there is the NASA photograph this year of the ice caps. It is increased by 60% in 1 year. Leading American scientists are now saying we are going into a period of between 15 and 30 years of global cooling. We may have made one of the biggest, stupidest collective mistakes in history by getting so worried about global warming. You can reverse this in the next 7 or 8 months. You can bring down people's taxes. If you don't, they'll vote on it in the European elections of next year.
Mr. Farage shows that populists are sometimes obscurantists. 99% of the science, Mr. Farage, believes that this climate change exists as a result of human activity. 99% of scientists. Of course, there are always people that are paid to say the opposite. But to pretend, as you pretend, that against all science, well-established science, that the problem of climate change is just an invention of the Greens or of the left, it's completely nonsense. Of course we have to find a way